There were some truly horrifying cases and crimes in the past, and even in this era too, that if today's modern technology did not exist, those cases would have been disappeared like trees in jungle. No outcome, no conclusion, nothing would ever be reached. Friends, let's focus on today's case, which is the 1983 KFC Massacre. The discovery of the crime scene did not happen immediately. On the night of September 23, 1983, the Kentucky Fried Chicken in Kilgore, Texas was preparing to close. Kim Miller drove to the restaurant to check on her mother, Mary Tyler, who was the assistant manager. Instead of routine greetings, Miller found the back door open and blood pooled onto the floor. The staff was gone. Approximately $2,000 was missing from the registers. This was no simple robbery. It was the beginning of a mystery that would span for decades. Police arrived to find signs of a struggle throughout the kitchen. Blood spattered near the counter and the desk where the money was kept indicated violence. Several bags of garbage had been dropped just outside the back door, suggesting the abduction happened in the middle of the closing duties. 5 people had been taken: Mary Tyler, 37 years old; Opie Hughes, 39 years old; Joy Johnson, 20 years old; David Maxwell, 20 years old; and Monte Landers, 19 years old. The group included 3 employees and 2 friends who had stopped by to visit. The following morning, an oil field worker discovered the answer to the night's silence on a rural road in Rusk County. The scene was methodical and brutal. 4 bodies lay in a row, face down and shot execution style. They had been forced to kneel before being shot in the back and sides. A 5th body lay 30 to 40 yards away. Opie Hughes had attempted to run. She achieved significant momentum before falling, her head down in the dirt with clumps of grass and weeds clenched tightly in her fist. All victims had been shot at least once in the head and torso with a .38 or a larger caliber weapon. They had been driven 10 miles south of Kilgore to a remote well lease and slaughtered. The investigation immediately faced a vacuum of leads. The homicides were nearly perfect in their lack of witnesses. For over a decade, the case deteriorated. It became a frustration for the community and fascination for every armchair detective in East Texas. Authorities chased hundreds of tips, but the evidence found at both the restaurant and the oil field pointed nowhere. The technology to decipher the biological clues left behind simply did not exist yet. In 1995, the investigation seemed to catch a break with the indictment of James Earl Jimmy Mankins Jr. Prosecutors based their case on a torn fingernail found in the waistband of one of the victims. They believed Mankins, a local man, had lost the nail during the struggle. Mankins was also known for boasting about the crime, allegedly trying to gain credibility among drug dealers. The pressure mounted until DNA testing conclusively proved the fingernail did not belong to him. A judge eventually ordered the removal of the indictments. In 2003, Mankins, who had spent 6 months in jail fearing the death penalty, was cleared. He later stated that without the DNA, he likely would have been executed for a crime he did not commit. With the prime suspect eliminated, the case went colder than ever. However, biological evidence collected in 1983 sat patiently in storage. Lab technicians had recovered blood spots from a napkin and a box of cash register tapes found behind the counter. In 1983, blood evidence was useful for typing, but not for individual identification. No one knew the significance of those spots. The turn of the millennium brought a technological revolution. In 2001, retesting of the old evidence yielded a profile, the blood of the napkin and the box linked to 2 men who were already incarcerated, Romeo Pinkerton and Darnell Hartsfield. They were cousins from the Tyler, Texas area. It was a revelation that shifted the pattern of the investigation. The 2 men had actually been on the radar of authorities in 1983. They even appeared on the makeshift "wanted for questioning" poster back then, but they had slipped through the cracks. Arrests did not happen immediately. Investigators built a case, and in late 2005, a Rusk County grand jury accused Pinkerton and Hartsfield on 10 counts of capital murder. Hartsfield faced additional legal trouble. He had been convicted for aggravated perjury related to the case after telling a grand jury he had never been inside the KFC restaurant. The DNA evidence proved otherwise, placing him at the scene the night of the murders. He was already serving a life sentence for that perjury due to his extensive criminal history, which included aggravated robbery and drug convictions. Romeo Pinkerton faced the system in 2007. His trial was moved to Bowie County due to the excessive publicity in East Texas. Midway through the trial, facing a potential death sentence, Pinkerton accepted a plea bargain. He pleaded guilty to 5 counts of murder and received 5 life sentences. The decision was strategic. Pinkerton later claimed from prison that he took the deal because his life was in jeopardy in the jail. He felt unsafe, threatened by other inmates. Despite the guilty plea, Pinkerton maintained his innocence. He argued a conspiracy theory, insisting the blood evidence was planted. This assertion faced a logical hurdle. The blood was collected in 1983, roughly 5 years before DNA profiling became a useful forensic tool. Planting blood that would later identify a specific individual required an insight that did not exist. His attorney, David Griffith, dismissed the conspiracy theory, noting it would require planting evidence 5 years before the technology to read it existed. Pinkerton's stance created a narrative that conflicted with the facts. He told the Associated Press, "The real killer is out there, still walking around. I am innocent all day long in this case. I never took anybody's life." He pointed to the racial dynamics of the case. The victims were white and he and his cousin were black, suggesting they were convenient targets. Prosecutors were unmoved. The DNA placed him there and the plea sealed his fate. In 2008, Darnell Hartsfield faced trial. Unlike his cousin, he faced the charges. A jury found him guilty and he was also sentenced to life in prison. With the convictions of Pinkerton and Hartsfield, the state effectively closed the book on two of the perpetrators. However, a nagging inconsistency remained. During the trials, prosecutors revealed a detail that complicated the narrative of just two killers. Lab technicians had developed a DNA profile from biological material recovered from the plants of Opie Hughes. The profile originated from semen and belonged to an unknown man of African descent. This profile did not match Romeo Pinkerton. It did not match Darnell Hartsfield. It did not match James Mankins. The presence of this third DNA sample confirmed a long-held suspicion. There was a third person involved in the massacre. The real killer that Pinkerton shouted about from the Robertson Unit prison might have been himself, or he might have been referring to this third man. The theory that a third person participated in the abduction and murders gained traction. Hartsfield, even from behind bars, maintained that the true killer was still at large. The investigation into the third individual remained open and ongoing, but for years the trail went cold. The genetic profile sat in the system, waiting for a match that did not come. The years passed slowly for the victims' families and the convicts. Pinkerton continued to serve his time in the Alert Unit near Wichita Falls with a parole eligibility date set for 2024. Hartsfield remained incarcerated until May 4, 2022, when he died at the age of 61 from a massive hemorrhage stroke. With Hartsfield's death, the number of living convicted culprits dropped to 1, yet the question of the third man lingered over East Texas. The physical evidence from that night in 1983 held one more secret. The semen on Opie Hughes' pants was a key that had yet to find its lock. While the legal system had processed Pinkerton and Hartsfield, the genetic genealogy revolution was just beginning to take hold in criminal investigations. The tools that identified Pinkerton and Hartsfield from blood spots on a napkin had evolved. It was time to look at the unknown male profile again. The Rusk County District Attorney Office, now led by Michael E. Jamerson, worked alongside the Texas Rangers. They knew the profile belonged to a man of African descent. They also knew that without a match in a criminal database, traditional investigation methods were stalled. They turned to the science of family trees. In 2023, the Texas Rangers submitted the Cold Case to Sexual Assault Kit Initiative (SAKI), a program utilizing Department of Justice funding to resolve unsolved sexual assaults and related homicides. This step marked the transition from standard investigation to a genetic manhunt. Investigators looked for connections. They used the DNA profile to search for familiar links in public genealogy databases. The process is complex, requiring the identification of distant relatives and the construction of family trees to pinpoint a specific individual. In July 2024, the evidence from Hughes' clothing was sent to Board Technologies for advanced testing and genealogical analysis. The results pointed towards a specific lineage. By May 2025, the testing had narrowed the focus down to 3 brothers in East Texas: Larry, Billy, and Davon Riggs. The Riggs brothers were from the area, placing them geographically within the sphere of the crime. The task now was to distinguish between the siblings. DNA from the crime scene had to be compared to reference samples or known profiles to the brothers to see which one was the source. The investigation into the Riggs brothers revealed a history of violence and crime that aligned with the brutality of KFC murders. Just 7 weeks after the KFC massacre. Davon Riggs was arrested in neighboring Shelby County. The charge was attempting murder. He had tried to kill his own brother, Billy Riggs. This incident was not just a domestic dispute. It uncovered a cache of stolen items that linked Davon to a pattern of criminal behavior. Police searching the Riggs family and their home found numerous stolen goods. Billy Riggs, facing the weight of the evidence, provided a written confession regarding the burglaries. He named Davon as his partner in crime. The inventory of their thefts included multiple vans. This detail was potentially critical. The KFC victims had been abducted and transported to an oil field. A vehicle capable of holding 5 people was a necessity for such a crime. The theft of the vans suggested the means to move the victims. Billy Riggs' confession did not stop at the vehicles. He admitted to stealing a .357 handgun. He stated that the last time he saw the weapon, it was in the possession of Davon. The .357 caliber matched the ballistic profile of the murder's large caliber execution style. The overlap of the timeline, the weaponry, and the violent tendencies of the Riggs brothers painted a compelling picture. Davon Riggs was in the right place with the right weapon and the right criminal associates at the right time. The forensic breakthrough came in November 2025. The genealogical report issued by the testing facility confirmed what investigators suspected. The DNA from the semen on Opie Hughes' pants did not belong to Larry or Billy Riggs. The report excluded them definitively. That left Davon Riggs as the source. The science had spoken. Davon Riggs was the third man. He was the one who had sexually assaulted Opie Hughes on or around September 23, 1983. The November 2025 report excluded Larry and Billy Riggs definitively, naming Davon as the source of the DNA. The link to the sexual assault of Opie Hughes was established. However, finding a name on a family tree is different than proving a motive. While the genetic evidence provided the who, investigators still needed the how. They had to prove the Riggs was not just a genetic match but a willing participant in the violence. To do that, they had to dig into the chaotic timeline of his life in the last weeks surrounding September 1983. The science had identified a ghost. Now the detectives had to flesh out the man. There was a final twist in the tale of this long investigation. Davon Riggs would never face a courtroom. He was born in 1950s, making him a young man in 1983, but he had died in October 2010. He had been dead for 15 years by the time the authorities identified him. The announcement of this identification came with the understanding that there would be no trial, no sentencing, and no custody. The case was officially closed, but justice was a hollow prize for the families, knowing the man responsible had lived a full life and died a free man. The Rusk County District Attorney Office and lead prosecutor Lisa Tanner labeled him the last culprit with DNA evidence. The mystery of who the third man was had been solved, but the closure came with the somber reality of the time's passage. The details of the Riggs brothers' criminal enterprise uncovered during the review of cold case painted a picture of a chaotic, dangerous environment. The investigation into the 1983 shootings had always been blocked by lack of clear motive or a suspect with a violent enough history to suggest a massacre of this magnitude. Davon fit that profile in many ways investigators could not have seen in early 1980s. 7 weeks after the bodies were found in the oil field, Davon was arrested in Shelby County for the attempted murder of his brother Billy. This was not a minor dispute. It was a near-lethal encounter that signaled a tendency for extreme violence. It was the convergence of forensic science and old-fashioned detective work. The DNA from 1983 matched the profile from 2025, and the stolen gun from 1983 matched the MO of a known violent offender. The legal journey to this point, however, was paved with missteps that nearly derailed the pursuit of justice entirely. Before DNA technology advanced enough to clear the innocent, the system had focused on wrong man. The saga of James Earl serves as a stark reminder of the weakness of early forensic techniques. Romeo Pinkerton's trial in 2007 became the first test of the decades-old evidence. The atmosphere was tense, compounded by the passage of time and publicity surrounding the case. To ensure a fair trial, the venue was moved to Bowie County, roughly 100 miles from Kilgore. As the trial progressed, the weight of the evidence against Pinkerton became undeniable. Midway through the proceedings, facing a potential death sentence, Pinkerton chose self-preservation over a fight for release. He accepted a plea bargain, pleading guilty for 5 counts of murder in exchange for 5 life sentences. The sentencing hearing brought the victims' families face to face with the man who had shattered their lives. The courtroom was silent as the families delivered their victims' impact statements. Kathy Hamilton, whose brother David Maxwell was among the dead, did not mince a word. Looking directly at Pinkerton, she called him a coward for allowing the uncertainty to drag on for years. Jack Hughes, the husband of Opie Hughes, echoed the statement, telling Pinkerton he had no right to act as an animal and that his punishment would truly begin only after he drew his last breath. The emotional toll was intense. David Maxwell Jr., who was just a toddler when his father was murdered, expressed a conflicted sense of relief and sadness, noting that the anger stemmed largely from the years of silence and lack of answers. So with the identification of the third criminal confirmed, the Texas Department of Public Safety officially closed the case on December 16, 2025. The justice served was historical rather than punitive. However, for investigators and the families, the closure was absolute. The speculation ended. The theories about the third killer running free were laid to rest. So this was today's case. News about it came out around a month ago, so I thought we should revisit it and clearly explain how this case reached its conclusion. I hope you liked my effort. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll meet again in another video. Till then, goodbye and good night.